Welcome to the Noclip podcast, the podcast about the people who play and make video games. I am your host, Danny O'Dwyer, joined by... Actually, I should come up with some sort of spooky name. Danny Boudoir, something like that. Jesse, how do you spook up your name? How does Garasha get spooked?
It's scary enough for everyone that doesn't know how to pronounce it.
On today's episode, our Halloween special, I guess, we're going to talk about a spooky game, Choo Choo Charles, a game that was basically went like crazy viral about 2 weeks ago because of a very short trailer that the single lone developer creator, Gavin Eisenbeisz, put out. But I think the scariest thing about it is that Gavin now has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people wanting this game, and he's developing it all on his own. So I did an interview with him last week to talk to him about, the crazy success he's had, the games he's been making since he was like 12 years old, and his plans for Choo Choo Charles. But before we get into all that spookiness, Jesse, I thought it might be fun to talk about some of our adventures into the scary games over the years. We've also got some great emails from people and tweets and Discord mentions, which we'll get to after the interview. But before we get to that, Jesse, let's chat about some spooky games. When you think about like the games that were the scariest to you, do you do the same thing as me and just go back to when you were like a teenager?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I look at games that I play recently, and horror, scary stuff in general, it doesn't really become a big part of the catalog of games. Yeah, it's easier to go back because you were scared when you were a kid. Now you're like, this is just annoying. I just want the stupid enemy to go away. I want to collect the item. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I was trying to think about like contemporary games that freaked me out. Like PT definitely did. So like that's in there. But I feel like I was scared much more often, and also by games that perhaps weren't horror games. Like that happened a lot more. What's like number one, like top game that whenever someone asks the question, what was a game that freaked you out, that always like immediately comes to your mind?
It's a tie, honestly, between it's Alien Isolation and probably Manhunt 2. I remember firing that up for the first time. Yeah, I know, right? Not like traditionally a game that's supposed to be scary, but I played it when I was maybe a little too young. I think that came out when I was 15, 16, something like that.
I think it might have been a little bit younger, because I remember reporting on this on the Irish radio, like in the press, because it was actually banned in Ireland. This was one of the very few games, that was banned. And I think Manhunt 2 is the one where you could choke people using the Wii controller.
Yeah, it was. That was where I played it, which was maybe not the best time for someone. Oh, it was 2007, actually. So that one I would have been, I think, 12 when that came out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm a baby.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty terrifying. Like, obviously, that didn't turn me into a serial killer, but it was pretty scary. Like, just the way that you had to perform some of the actions. I distinctly remember, the blood and like the stuff they had to put on the screen to cover up what you were doing and hide the kind of like assassination stuff that 12-year-old me was doing with a Wii remote and nunchuck, the same things I used to play baseball and bowling. That was pretty traumatizing, man. I think back on that and I'm just like, man, why did my mom let me play this?
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, considering like legally I actually couldn't get access to it. If I remember right, they had a lot of like VHS and like blurring, like mosaic effects and stuff that kind of like almost made it look more grisly, because they were obfuscating the, your mind just fills in the blank at that stage.
It was, the camera wouldn't stay still. It was super like just nauseating to look at, and then nauseating to realize what you were doing. Visually, it reminds me of that Joker scene from The Dark Knight, where like the camera's shaking all over the place and he's like doing really awful things to this person, and it's like, yes, I was playing that.
So if I go back to my list and see like the game that I was 12 when I played, it is also the game that always comes to mind for me, which is I don't want to say original Alien versus Predator, because that's there are so many games that are called Alien versus Predator
Yeah.
that it is like outrageous. It's not the Jaguar one. It's not any of those. It's the original PC one. They also had a sequel, AVP2. So this was a game you could play as the alien. There was like 3 campaigns. You could play as the alien, you could play as the Predator, and you could play as the Marine. And they all played very differently. And there's a different sort of like, rock, paper, scissors thing going on, whereas the Predator was solo and up against lots of aliens, but like fully kitted out and like loads of gear. The Alien one was kind of like you could get killed really easily because you're an alien. So like one bullet basically, will kill you. But then the Marine one was the scariest one because it was just you and that motion sensor from Aliens just going like bleep, bleep, and like anything moved, it would beep and freak me out. And I remember the first level distinctly because you basically never come across an alien. But at one point, you're going through a little vent, which is like the most common thing that happens in games that never happens in real life, crawling through air vents. But it was just like most levels were air vent based levels in the 90s, especially. But you were crawling through one and a pipe burst and like stuck up through the vent, and it just looked like an alien head, and the motion sensor would go off. And I remember like unloading half a magazine into that pipe before I realized it was nothing. All right, let's keep playing our horror tennis. Back to you, Jesse. What else you got?
Well, on the same wavelength of Aliens versus Predator, like I said, Alien Isolation, just terrifying. I remember firing it up the first time and hearing that ambiance on the title screen of just like a desolate space ship kind of like noise banging off of metal and stuff, and like a slight grumble from the xenomorph in the background. That just terrified me, man. And then you play it, and it's like the bits that you're talking about in Aliens versus Predator with that beeping on the monitor. That's half the game, right? Like it's just looking at that screen, waiting for something to show up, and then it's the xenomorph, and it's so terrifying of a creature. It's just so scary. I can't believe how they pulled it off in terms of like the way that its tail moves and how every part of it feels so real. And then not even just the alien, it's the other things on the station, the synthoids or whatever.
Dude, I was about to say that. Like,
I think those are scarier.
100%. The thing, I remember seeing trailers for that and being like, okay, well, they're doing an Alien versus Predator thing, but like the alien, like you said, the xenomorph is way more resilient in that game. So it's not like AVP where at least if you get one shot away, you're good. But the Working Joes, I think that's what they're called, right?
That's what they're called,
The
yeah.
robots. Dude, I remember seeing like trailers or screenshots and thinking, I guess they have to add something else in because it can't just always be the alien. But like these things won't be scary, but I don't know, man. The way they pull that off, the way they talk, the like dead eyes, the eyes light up, right?
Yeah, they get like a bright red, and they're just, they're so relenting. They just come at you. It's like space robot Michael Myers, just the way that they come towards you with nothing stopping them. Yeah, terrifying. And then like you start shooting at them and they're kind of falling apart a little bit. Like, yeah, the blue blood. Ugh. Yeah, no, that was terrifying.
It's a terrific game. Yeah, really good. People should check out, first of all, the Alien Isolation documentary on Noclip.
Cross promotion.
YouTube.com/Noclip video. I can only take a very small amount of credit for that one because it was Chris, Brad, and Jeremy who filmed all those interviews in England. But I did edit that one, so I'll take that at least. And I might have done some voiceover actually too. I think I did. Yeah, so check that one out. It's only a short one. I think it's like 20-30 minutes. Back to me. I'm gonna mention one. I kind of tried to avoid the ones that I thought would come up in the questions later. So I'm going to talk about one that is not a horror game, but was genuinely scary, and that's Doom 3. So like obviously Doom 1 and 2 were like first-person action games, but there was definitely an element of like fear or horror in there. There was you up against a massive army of hell. It's implied that it's scary, but they weren't like capital H horror games, right? And neither is Quake, but these games are, especially if you're younger, they're kind of freaky. But Doom 3, because of I guess I don't know why they did this, but like it pulled in a very different direction to the first two, obviously, and subsequent Doom games. It was way more singular and intense and isolating. You were very much on your own. You were sort of stuck in a almost alien isolation style space station on Mars, like on your own. It kind of had vibes of like Event Horizon or something, right? Where you're stuck in a sort of an industrial style space station, but hell is invading. the lighting in that game. You know, they were making a really big deal of the dynamic lighting, which meant that you had a lot of areas where there was like very striking shadow work going on. Not a lot of like ambient light, but like, you know, very dark areas with like a fan and a light behind the fan and that type of thing going on.
the Blade Runner look. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you had, you know, to its detriment, perhaps, you had a lot of like transporting demons, right? You demons that would just kind of like appear out of monster closets or just like in the level. So you were always kind of on your toes. And it's not a perfect game in lots of ways, but like even the way they introduced the Pinky in that is like super scary. The hell levels are super scary, you know, in a way that like, you know, the new Dooms aren't meant to be scary that way. They're meant to be empowering, right? Like it's all about you as the Doomslayer scaring the demons, actually.
Look how badass you are. There's they have the flashlight against you now. Like that's what it feels like. Yeah.
Good. I forgot about the flashlight. You're right. You had the flashlight you'd hold up, and you couldn't hold the flashlight and the gun at the same time. So you had to, and there was a mod that was called the duct tape mod, and it just duct taped the flashlight to the gun.
I think that's the only way to play it.
There was also a Hello Kitty mod, so the light, the flashlight was like a little Hello Kitty flashlight, like the little icon.
Help bring it down,
which is pretty good. Exactly. I just take the edge off the anxiety even a little bit. All right, back to you, buddy. What you got?
Well, another one is probably Fear 2.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like Alma Wade. There's something about little girls with long black hair that just is automatically terrifying. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about society, but we've all agreed that that's horrifying.
The paler skin, the better.
Exactly.
It's that combination. I think Ringu has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. It's made it really hard for pale children to live their lives. The closer that their skin is to the color of the white of their eyeballs, that's what really brings the horror into my heart.
The golden ratio.
Yeah. You know, using weapons in a game like that, it's whenever a horror game gives you guns and stuff, it ends up making it I feel less scared because you have some way of attacking the enemy, and it you know, but in that game, obviously that's not really the case half the time. I mean, you know, you turn the corner, Alma's there, and like you turn back and she's gone, right? Or boom, there she is for half a second before she disappears. There are some jump scares, and I think compared to the first game, it's a lot more reliant on those, but the moments that show up, holy, those were at that point in my life, I think, where I hadn't really played a lot of horror games. That was so integral to me understanding what I do and do not like in terms of like things that really scare the crap out of me. And yeah, it turns out little girls suddenly appearing, very scary. The regular enemies and stuff, fighting people, that was cool, you know, and like the first game, the AI, still very interesting. I like playing those games, but the way that you get scared in Fear 2, the way that they try to do it has always stuck with me as like a great example of a good jump scare that plays on the mechanics of a first-person shooter as opposed to just being scary and you happen to be able to control the camera. I don't really know how to explain it super well, but just the way that you move around and the way that you interact with the world played so much more into those scares than just, oh, there's a thing and it pops up and I shoot it, you know, like that kind of horror element.
I think the reason, like, because I 100% agree, like the first Fear for me, and this might be just the, you know, the sort of generational gap we have here going on, but the first Fear for me was definitely that experience. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. The reason is because it's not a horror game.
Yeah.
It's a first person shooter. So you're constantly like forgetting it's a horror game and then being accosted with the reality every once in a while that it's a horror game, right? Because the shooting was good, and like the AI, as you mentioned, was good. It had that bolt gun that you could, you know, snap people to walls. It had physics in like, this was super early Havoc stuff, right? This is around, I think this might be, I can't remember if Fear came out between Half-Life 1 and 2, I think. So it was one of the first games to really like, you know, this was one that was, you know, melting graphics cards. It was a really good looking game with a lot of physics stuff. It was around the time those physics cards were out, which is like a very short-lived thing. But I'm totally with you. I think it's because it was a super competent shooter. Both those games are good. The story's interesting. You know, Point Man, Paxton Fettel, Alma, the reveals that happen. The ending of the first Fear is terrific. The big sort of moment that happens. And all the storytelling stuff is really interesting. But like you said, it's not just that. I think it's the fact that it's a horror game that's been inserted into a super solid shooter. And most of the horror games we talk about today are those capital HR games. You know, they're not Doom or Fear. They're games like Alien Isolation, which I guess is, you know, that's doing a lot more things. but it's, games like Outlast or PT,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like games that are Five Nights at Freddy's, that are made
Right.
to scare.
Exactly.
I kind of took over that one, but let me quickly talk about one for me, which is actually one of those throwback sort of horror capital HR games, Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth. If you've played this, I'll be very impressed.
Dude, who hasn't played the kicking simulator of our generation? That game's amazing. Like, if you're a fan of arcade games and you haven't played Call of Cthulhu, if you like Deathloop, go play Call of Cthulhu. It's nothing the same, but if you like kicking in Deathloop, go play Call of Cthulhu. Like, come on.
It's got a solid one. This is a weird game, right? Because it's kind of, this is kind of when the Lovecraft game thing started to really kick off. And I think in light of H.P. Lovecraft's personal ideologies on things, maybe we're going to see fewer and fewer of these.
Probably.
But Dark Corners of the Earth was very much the, fish people town in Maine or whatever.
Yeah, the Innsmouth people or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Jeremy can speak to this a lot better. Not that he's a fish person, but he's from Eastern.
He's from Innsmouth.
Massachusetts.
Could you believe it?
Well, I think Innsmouth was based on like a town that was close to where he grew up or something. Because he grew up near the coast in Massachusetts. But yeah, Call of Cthulhu was a game where you were being chased by the town a lot, and to like avoid that, you couldn't like shoot them. So you had to like basically run around the town, be stealthy. Sometimes you'd be chased and you'd have to like lock doors behind you and then like push bookcases over so they couldn't get past to slow them down. Your character also would like freak out because obviously it's terrifying. So they're like, vision would get blurry around the outside. He was also scared of heights. So sometimes you'd have to like walk on planks between buildings. And if you look down, it would get wobbly and he'd freak out. And so you had to like manage his fear level while you were also running away from all these crazy Innsmouth people. And yeah, it was a puzzle game. It wasn't, there was combat in it. You had a gun, but like you basically, the minute you used it, you had to be so careful because a bunch of other people would come chasing you.
Exactly. And like you said with the fear mechanic, it was kind of the progenitor for that sort of thing in most horror games not from that point on, but like around the release of Amnesia, there were a ton of games that did that same kind of thing of like, there's a mechanic involved in like your fear levels and you have to really watch over that and maintain it. And I really like how in Call of Cthulhu, there's those moments where like things aren't just scary, they're like gross. Like I really remember this guy up on like a plank and he's like torn apart, his rib cage is sticking out, like terrifying looking stuff. Or that one like crab monster with the big eye.
Dude, I am flabbergasted that you remember this game.
I played it relatively recently, like 4 or 5 years ago.
I was like, dude, you're playing Manhunt 2 and Call of Cthulhu when you were like 11.
I was 8 years old, cracking open Call of Cthulhu. Why not, right? It's just a bunch of eyeballs on a pillar. That's super normal and good for a child. Yeah. What are you talking about trauma? What do you mean? What?
All right, we'll let you have the final one then. I think I'm done with my scariest best of. What do you have any more to mention?
Yeah, I mean the only one that I'd want to bring up would be the first BioShock, actually. Not like that it's super scary all around. I think there are parts of it, but one moment in particular that was just like, wow, was when you get the shotgun for the first time.
Okay.
In that game. Do you remember that at all?
This isn't when you meet the doctor, is it?
No. That's really scary. When he starts screaming and yelling and stuff, that's pretty terrifying. That was a great introduction.
Yeah, you walk in on him and he's saying like, what is it? Like, I try to make them beautiful, but they always turn out wrong.
This one is too fat. This one has too many nipples. Like, yeah, stuff like that.
It was so weird. Yeah. It was just like so unnerving. But what was the shotgun bit? Was there like an enemy that turns up or something?
Well, so there's not a specific enemy, but when you go to get the shotgun, you're like in this apartment complex. And when you pick it up, the lights go out and it's dark all of a sudden. And the game doesn't play with lighting too often. It's usually pretty visible, despite being low brightness. It's still, you can kind of see what's going on. But in that one section, the game just goes completely black. And all you hear are the splicers running around, getting ready to stab you, throwing their things at you. And
is that an Irish accent I heard there?
That's just how they say it in the game, man. I don't know what you're talking about. And they... And you've got the shotgun and you can just, the ambience and the sound and everything really play into making it so scary because you can hear them like yelling and whispering in the distance all around you in like a 360 space. And then, yeah, you go to fire the shotgun and you don't realize how loud it's going to be, or at least I didn't when I did this the first time.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a real punchy shotgun. It's not like Doom in that it feels good to shoot, but it sounds really loud, or at least it did on the 360.
Yeah, it's like a blunderbuss. It almost feels.
Yeah.
It's just like it's almost too big. Yeah, it kicks back. Yeah.
Great stuff. I can't believe how long that game has been my favorite game, and for so many different reasons. And that one just sticks with me of how scary it is.
Yeah, like it doesn't come up that often. But you're totally right. And like games in that ilk, like System Shock, that definitely again weren't trying to be horror. You're not going to find them in the horror section of a video game library, but they had a certain amount of dread and isolation and tension, I think, to that. And I think especially when you're younger, like that's what happens a lot, is that those types of games that get under your skin, they really get under your skin when you're a kid. The last one actually I forgot to mention that I had jotted down here was of course the first Resident Evil, but that goes without saying. Just like that is 100% a game that is created to freak you out as much as possible and does a terrific job. We're going to talk about some of your scariest games after our interview here. Thanks so much to everyone who's been emailing in and sending us messages on Discord. Before we get into the interview, I do want to say that if you'd like to support this 100% ad-free podcast, fund our documentaries and get access to a bunch of bonuses, including videos, bonus episodes of this podcast, Discord access, and loads more, head over to patreon.com/Noclip. We've had loads this month. We had early access for our Chivalry 2 documentary, for the Death's Door documentary. We've had a bunch of episodes of our new show, Noclip Wishlist, go up. Edit Club, there's loads. We're kind of at the end of the month now, so it's quieting down a little bit. But of course, if you sign up to our Patreon, you also get access to all of the other stuff that's been produced and published there for 5 years. So there's never any shortage of documentaries or videos for you to check up on. Okay, let's jump into our interview. Gavin Eisenbeisz, the creator of Choo Choo Charles, a viral hit about 2 weeks ago, which means maybe it's disappeared into obscurity already. Who knows? He is a young guy. He's in his early 20s, and he's been making games since before he was a teenager. Choo Choo Charles is a game, let me explain this, I guess. It is a game where you are controlling a train that is being hunted by another train, but that train is also a spider and doesn't need to go on tracks and has a really scary face. And his name is Choo Choo Charles. The game itself, the video that was put up on the internet, on Twitter, and I think YouTube subsequently, is basically a sort of very brief tech demo, vertical slice sort of pitch video of what this game will be, which is a game where you're managing this train, you are going on very light quests in this world to get resources to upgrade the train. And then every once in a while, this crazy, freaky spider train turns up and tries to attack you. And basically the end game of this game is to upgrade your train enough so that you can outfit it with armor and guns and stuff and take down the horror that is Choo Choo Charles. It is impossible to evoke the special blend of cosmic nightmare that this game it does visually in words. So I would recommend people check out the trailer, probably even before listening to this. How would you describe what this game is, Jesse? Have I done a decent job? I'm not sure.
I think that's pretty bang on. It is, or it seems to be anyways. I'm sure things will change as time goes on. It is pretty early days for this game. But it does seem like the main goal is for you to upgrade your train so that you can fight this terrifying acid Thomas the Tank Engine. It's a terrifying creature, and I think that's kind of the appeal. Like a lot of new horror games, especially indie horror games, the virality of it and the popularity comes from how scary the monster that's chasing you is. And in this case, I'd say it's like an 8 or 9 on the terrifying monster scale. Yeah, there are parts where you're on foot and, you're looking for resources to upgrade your train with. That seems to be the goal right now. There's characters you can talk to that you see in the trailer that will probably give you missions and stuff like that. Gavin goes over that more during the interview, but there are elements of it that I think are going to be really appealing for people who don't just want to play something that's going to terrify them. It actually seems like it'll be a game that's just fun to play. And then, briefly, you'll be scared out of your mind.
Well, the interesting thing about this, though, right, is that because this is a very brief look at this game, the problem you have is that then we all assume things about the game.
Yeah.
We assume things about its scope. We assume things about its tone or its intent or what you're going to be doing, right? So for me, the scariest thing is that we all come in with these assumptions about what this game might be. And he's only shown off this very brief vertical slice in the trailer. 2-Star Games, I guess the name of his company, but it's basically just him working on these games. He's made games in the past. He brought out a game called My Beautiful Paper Smile, which I've been playing on Steam for the past week or so. He brought that out like a couple of weeks back. He came out essentially, and it's a fairly modest indie game. It's the type of game where I was like, oh, it's awesome that one person was able to make this. But it does feel like a game that was made by one person, as well. So when you look at something like Choo Choo Charles, the trailer itself sort of evokes a very almost PT level of intrigue, right? Where people are able to, assume a lot about the game. And to me, that's the scary thing, is becoming one of those games where people's expectations outstrip the ability of one person, the ability of 2 people, of 3 people, perhaps. So we can sort of get into that in this interview. It's as much to do with the game itself as it is to do with Gavin himself, his ability, which is really impressive considering how, inexperienced and young, I guess he is. Maybe inexperienced is unfair because he's been doing this since he was like 12 years old. But yeah, he struck me as a really interesting guy. And I think someone who sort of understands the difficulty he has with expectation and the audience as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this game becomes in the end, because I think, like you said, Gavin seems to have a really good understanding of what makes for a fantastic indie horror game. Like you said, you were playing My Beautiful Paper Smile. I checked that out a little bit as well. Just a really well done game. It doesn't not feel like that was one person that put it together. That's something that I think you can feel right away. And it's something that the trailer did not sell to me at all, by the way, that this was made by one person. I know that he was influenced by some of the work of Derek Liu on YouTube, some of the videos that he's put out and the tweets and everything that have inspired that work. And I think that kind of plays into being a singular developer, right? When you're doing everything, you also rely on the back catalog of information and research and just experience of people that have come before. And being good at doing that on your own requires you to be able to leverage that work. And Gavin's done a really fantastic job of that throughout his career. And he's created some information of his own for other people with these tutorials that he's done for the Unreal Engine, for Unreal Engine 5. It's great to see that the overlap, right, of not just taking information and using that to build up your own work, but also giving back to the community and doing something like that for other people. So that's great to see. I'm excited to see more from him in the future, and I'm excited to get to Choo Choo Charles whenever that comes out.
Yeah, it seems to be he sort of is the new. To me, this is the mold of this young developer, like the kids who grew up playing Minecraft, maybe the ones who are playing Roblox, right, where they got interested in games at a young. And I'm not saying he necessarily did, but these types of younger generation developers who got interested in the nuts and bolts in game design and had access to the tools way earlier than people did 20 or 30 years ago, where a guy is able to like put up YouTube tutorials on Unreal Engine when he's a teenager, you know what I mean? Who's able to make a game like My Beautiful Paper Smile while he's in high school and then launch it as a commercial product. So it's a really interesting meeting of both the ambition of young developers, the tools that are kind of at their disposal right now, but also the terrifying reality of the ability to go viral really early. One of the things he talks about, though, is the design of Choo Choo Charles being so that it would go viral. So in many ways, he's already done the hardest part. Let's jump into it. This is our interview with Gavin Eisenbeisz, all about Choo Choo Charles. So, yeah, how are you? How has the past week and change been, considering the crazy response to Choo Choo Charles?
It's been good. It's good. I've been well for the most part. It's been a little bit stressful, I was not expecting such a large response at this time. I was expecting, something maybe a little closer to launch, but not quite so early. So honestly, it's great. It's good, but it just was unexpected. It's been a little bit overwhelming, but I'm starting to get kind of caught up with stuff, so it hasn't been too bad lately.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. It looks like you've been making games from a pretty early age. I saw that you've been working on bits and bobs and modeling and stuff from your sort of early teens.
Yeah, yeah. So I started making games when I was 12. A friend of mine introduced me to Blender, which currently it's just a 3D modeling program, but a few years back it had a game engine as well, and he would make games in there. And so he told me, he's like, "Yo, dude, you can make video games. It's so cool." And so I started doing that and fell in love with it. It was fantastic. I had a lot of fun doing it. I had made tons and tons of different, little prototypes and stuff in Blender. And after some time, I started using Unreal because I felt like I kind of wanted to start trying some bigger stuff. So I started publishing games. I think when I was 14, I did my first mobile game. And so since then, I've done something like 8 games, I think. I've done quite a few. I've done some stuff on mobile, some stuff on Steam. So Choo Choo Charles, I'm not sure what number this is, to be honest. I'd need to go back and count, but yeah. So kind of my more recent stuff, that I've been making as 2-star games has been My Beautiful Paper Smile, which I actually just launched out of early access, October 14th. So that was pretty cool. That was kind of my first big game as 2-star. I also did a couple of free games called Cloud Climber and My Friend is a Raven for game jams originally, but I put them on Steam just kind of as free games for people to check out. And then I also did a free spin-off for My Beautiful Paper Smile called Night and River Anchor. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the past few years, and kind of where I've gotten to lately.
So is it fair to say that these are sort of like the creative endeavors of a young person understanding their craft, like that you've been making these games, releasing them, like changing, climbing different mountains, like trying to make something a little bit bigger with each of those? Is that like they've not all been like commercial endeavors?
I think from the beginning, I mean, obviously, I love making games, so I genuinely enjoy it. But from the beginning, I always had the goal to also make commercially successful games because, like, if I'm going to do it all the time, if I'm going to do it full time, like, I need to make some money off of it. So I've kind of always had a drive to try to figure out, how you can actually make money with this stuff. And so with my first few games, obviously, they didn't make any money. My first few mobile games, my first few games didn't do that great either. But with each game, I'm kind of trying to take what I learned from the last one and figure out, okay, what worked, what didn't, what can I change here? And so I'm definitely trying to make each game, I'd say, reach more people than the last, because I have done a couple, the free games and stuff, and even though I'm not making money directly off of those, I kind of use them as ad space for my other projects. So it's kind of just working slowly, over years and years of time, just trying to figure out what things I can put in place for myself to make things easier going forward, and just trying to figure out how I can crack the code, and start making some successful, profitable games that people can, actually enjoy playing and that a lot of people actually will play. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're also a one person team, which means that you're not just learning one discipline, you're learning a half dozen or a dozen disciplines, the game design, art, sound, marketing, social media. Like do you find it like, do you like doing all that sort of stuff? Like what's stopping you from maybe collaborating with some other people within the space?
I think the main thing for me is that I don't really like complexity very much, with which kind of sounds a little bit weird saying out loud, because I mean, making games is just inherently a complicated process. But I just kind of have always felt like making games with other people would make it more complicated. So that's kind of my stance on that. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I also just don't like have any money to pay people. So, like, it's that's a problem there. Yeah, I mean, I would say I do enjoy pretty much all of it. There's some things that, it's not like it's unicorns and rainbows all the time. Like, I'm not always having the time of my life. When I first started trying to market, my games, like with My Beautiful Paper Smile, like that was super super difficult. The game, it just wasn't very market optimized, and so trying to make tweets about it and stuff was incredibly difficult. And so obviously, like during that time, I hated social media and marketing and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm a little bit more okay with it. Yeah, it's kind of just been, a process of figuring out what stuff I can focus on that, I will enjoy the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine it's a large. There's a lot of big learning curve you're on in lots of different ways. Let's talk about My Beautiful Paper Small because I saw it on Steam and it's getting good reviews. I wonder if have you had more attention on that project because of Choo Choo Charles as well?
No, not really. Yeah, it was actually kind of surprising. I mean, I haven't really done any cross promotion at all between Choo Choo Charles and My Beautiful Paper Smile. I kind of just wanted to keep the attention on Choo Choo Charles and not like distract people much. And so, yeah, no, I mean, normally My Beautiful Paper Smile, kind of on an average day, would get like 20 or 30 wish lists. And at the height of the Choo Choo Charles boom, Paper Smile got like an extra 60 wish lists, and that was about it. So it didn't really impact it much.
Right. Tell us about that game, about the project and working on it, and because you've only just, as you said, just brought it out of early access yesterday.
Yeah, so that project, that's been a big one. It's been the biggest game project that I've worked on to date, and it took me, I think, over 3 years from start to finish. So I started working on that one towards the end of high school. And so because of that, I wasn't really able to put in that much time working on it. Is maybe like 5, 6 hours a week for, a couple of years before I started, actually being able to work on that full time. And so in any case, that's kind of the scope of it. It's been a larger project for me. But the game itself, it's a chapter based sort of point and click adventure horror game. It's about this little creepy kid with a mask, and he's kind of being raised in this facility where other creepy dudes teach kids to be perfect. So basically, kids have to smile all the time. They're not allowed to feel emotions or anything. And so, your goal in the game is to escape from this facility, and then kind of as you're escaping, you start kind of learning a little bit more about the world and why this facility even exists. And so you go on to confront the king of this island you're on and try to learn a little bit more about what's going on, why is it going on, and trying to fix stuff.
Is it safe to assume that this is somewhat reflective of your high school experience?
That's a good question. You could maybe say so, perhaps. There might be some similarities there.
Oh, hey, well, you're out of it now. Are you working, doing work game stuff now full time, or are you in college, or what's going on?
I am, yeah. So I'm currently I'm still living with my parents. Hopefully, not for too much longer. Maybe Choo Choo Charles will help me out with that. But yeah, so I am working on it full time. I I have some other kind of side gigs, I guess you could say. I sell like software courses, teaching people how to use Unreal 5. So that's been, helping out with, just general income stuff. So that's kind of allowing me to be safely full time.
Yeah, I did this. I stayed after high school. I was 4 years of my parents working away, trying to save up enough and get my portfolio worked. So I can. I think you're doing the right thing. It worked out for me at least. Maybe I'm reading between the lines, but you said that, like, obviously My Beautiful Paper Smile, perhaps not the easiest game to sell immediately what it is to somebody via a screenshot or a 140 characters or 280 characters. Was Choo Choo Charles like a reaction to that? That, like, you wanted to make something that was a bit more sort of arresting, like immediately just grab people's attention?
Yeah, it's very much designed to be, I want to say, like inherently viral, you know, and not just like something that'll get attention, but it's kind of designed in such a way that it'll convert people better, like from someone just like watching a video to being like, oh shoot, like I actually kind of want to play that. Yeah, it's definitely, I learned a lot from Paper Smile, seeing some of the stuff that worked, some of the stuff that didn't. Just for example, that game got played by a lot of very large YouTubers. In total, around 15 million views on YouTube, which is not bad for an indie game, but I didn't see any return from that, or any really correlation when it came to sales numbers or wish lists or much of anything. And so it was like, okay, I can get people's attention, but how do I actually make them want to play this thing for themselves? So yeah, a lot learned from that game that I'm implementing for Choo Choo Charles.
So then I guess I'm sure you've grown up, right, since you're before you're a teenager making games. I'm sure you're in like video game communities. It seems like you understand the sort of the hype train, as it were, and how that can also sort of cut back the other way. How do you sort of ensure that the game that you make, right, is not a bait and switch? Because obviously the best thing that happens with the biggest viral hit is that there's always a certain undercurrent within the gaming community that is more than happy to turn it into a disaster story if it doesn't sort of reach their expectations. Is that something you worry about at all?
At first, it kind of was, and I was just talking to a guy earlier about this. I think ultimately, like the trailer that I've got for the game, I think it's very true to the actual gameplay and the kind of stuff that people are actually going to be doing in the game. So I think kind of the main thing is just making sure that I give myself enough time to make sure it's all polished well, make sure that the mechanics all work how they should, just making sure that everything is dense and fun, and that it doesn't just feel like a empty boring game. So since it is kind of sort of an open world type of thing, that is something that I'm a little bit worried about, is just it not being, like dense enough, not enough, weight being put on the world and all that kind of stuff. So I just kind of need to make sure I'm just putting enough time into that, because I mean, ultimately, I'm not gonna ship it if it's not fun.
Tell us a little bit about the game then. I'm sure at this stage you don't want to be, over promising, or you want to keep things for the future when you're revealing stuff. But just, what are you sort of comfortable talking about, like in terms of the gameplay of Choo Choo Charles?
Yeah, so Choo Choo Charles it's got sort of some RPG type elements, but with trains. At the start of the game, you get your own personal train, and you use that train to navigate around your island. So I'd say one major part of the gameplay is just kind of navigation, which is ultimately pretty simple. You move your train forward, you go to maybe a split in the railway. You swap whatever direction. Maybe you need to clear some debris that's on the tracks, and you try and navigate to whatever destination you're trying to get to. And once you're close enough to it on your train, then you have to go out on foot and get there the rest of the way. So kind of the goal there is you navigate to points of interest. So stuff like NPCs or areas that have a lot of like resources. So that would be like scraps, which you can then use to upgrade your train. So you can get scraps just laying around on the ground, or from NPCs if you do missions for them, stuff like that. Maybe some NPC's farm is being overrun by evil cows, and you got to go blast some cows or farmers. I don't know. I haven't figured out all the details of that yet, but just kind of general mission type stuff, and then you'll get some scraps from them that you can also use to upgrade your train. You can upgrade stuff like your train speed so that you can travel around faster, or so that you can escape Charles more easily if he starts attacking you. You can upgrade your damage, the damage that your weapons do, as well as the amount of health your train has, so like your armor. Then you take that, your upgraded train that you're just kind of rolling around upgrading over time, and then you'll eventually gather up enough supplies to summon Charles to a final duel. And then if you've upgraded your train enough, and if you are well prepared. I said that weird, but yeah, I think you get the idea. Then you'll fight him, and you'll either kill him or you'll die, and then you'll need to go back and explore some more, get some more upgrades, and try again.
Tell us a little bit about Charles. Obviously, he's quite an eye-catching chap. What was the idea behind his look?
Yeah, so Charles, Charles the Spider Train. Everybody thinks they know where the idea came from. You know, a lot of people think it's from like Stephen King. A lot of people think it's from Skyrim mods.
Thomas the Tank Engine. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the most common one that everybody thinks it came from. I didn't even know that was a thing when I started working on it. But yeah, so basically, I knew that for this game, I wanted to have a really strong character, specifically a really strong enemy. And I was just kind of thinking one day, and I realized that horror games, they tend to, like subvert your expectations and make some random thing from your childhood scary that isn't normally scary. You got stuff like Five Nights at Freddy's with the animatronics, or Tattletale with like, like Furby type stuff. And so there's a lot of games that do that with various things. But I was kind of realizing that like kids TV shows are completely untapped in the horror game genre. Like I've only seen one horror game that utilizes or that kind of makes a spoof on some kind of a TV show, and that's My Friendly Neighborhood, I believe. It's a game coming out by DreadX or DreadXP. That's like the only one that I've seen that's not even out yet. It's spoofing, what is it, Sesame Street? So you got like puppets and stuff.
But yeah, kids' TV shows are pretty fucked up, aren't they? Like, I'm just going through the ones that I watch now, and I'm like, yeah, like throughout the ages, like Teletubbies is fucking weird, and yeah, like Thomas the Tank Engine, I guess. Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, it is. It is. So Thomas the Tank Engine, that was probably my favorite TV show when I was younger. That was a favorite of mine. I really liked it. I wasn't really scared of it, but it just, came to mind as a TV show that hadn't really been spoofed on in horror games. And so I was like, that could be interesting. I had seen like there are some animations out there by, I believe, Tom Coben. He did this animation called like Thomas Feeds, like Thomas the Tank Engine, but with like spider legs and like snake head, and I don't know, it's crazy stuff. So that's where the spider legs came from for Thomas, because I was thinking about Thomas, and then I was thinking, that's actually a pretty cool design. I might just kind of be inspired by that. Yeah, that's kind of where Charles came from. That's his origin
terrifying
story.
looking dude. I've seen a lot of. It was 2 days on Twitter where it's all I could see. I felt bad for people who were scared of trains or clowns or stuff. So I guess I want to ask you about like the fallout from the reaction to it. You're obviously like very savvy. You've been doing this work since you were a young age. You are young and in a way inexperienced the way all young people are, but you're probably incredibly experienced for your age. So what's it like at the moment having all this attention? Are you finding like a lot of publishers reaching out and a lot of like business people reaching out? And is that, because to me, that's the scariest thing about doing anything. The creative side I can handle, but it's when that stuff starts knocking on my door that I get freaked out. Has that been happening to you?
I've gotten countless publishing offers. I'm definitely not going to be working with a publisher for the PC release. I've considered it for like console stuff, but yeah, lots of publishers. I was kind of surprised at some of the publishers that that reached out, but yeah, publishers, a- an insane amount of voice actors and musicians. That's a common one. I've been talking with some console people about some potential porting stuff. Yeah, there's been a lot of attention from various business people.
But you've decided you feel like your strongest hand is to self-publish at least on PC. Is that because you've done it once before, you kind of know what you're doing?
Yeah, I've done it a couple times, especially with Paper Smile, kind of getting a pretty clear look at like what the process is, like what do you really need when it comes to publishing PC game, and like what's actually the most important stuff, and a publisher is not it. I feel like there are very few scenarios where an indie game developer, especially a solo developer, genuinely needs a publisher.
So where do you get your support from, right? Because it sounds like you're an independent creative. You have been for a long time. You're clearly accomplished at it and advancing your skills and learning. But obviously, this is a lot for one person to sort of shoulder at the moment. Is there anywhere you're getting like support, be it creatively or even just like as a human? Like, are you part of any like gaming forums, or does your family sort of are you able to talk to them about any of this?
I've got a couple game developer friends that I talk with when I can, just about where stuff's going, what strategies I'm trying, and they tell me about the strategies that they're trying, what kind of stuff is going on with them. So a little bit. I don't I don't know. That's kind of the most of it. My parents they try and understand it as much as they can. My dad follows along with kind of the stuff I'm working on pretty closely. So it's good to talk with him about it and see what he thinks and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting sometimes, but yeah.
So, what do you think the next couple of years look like for you? Like, is this something you're going to try and get out next year? Is it something you're trying to not think about the release date of and just kind of axe to the grindstone, just slowly but surely kind of get through it? Like, I imagine when you come off, I guess, one big marketing beat and it ended up being probably louder than you were anticipating, like you said, there's probably a desire to keep hitting that drum maybe a little bit, but obviously that's can be counterproductive if you're setting expectations up. So, what do you think the next like 6 months or a year looks like for you and the project? Are you gonna kind of go a little bit quiet and work on it? Are you gonna keep people updated? What are you feeling?
So when I first started working on the game, I was hoping to have like a 6-month project. That was the original hope. But kind of as I started coming up with ideas and thinking about what stuff was going to make people most interested in it, it kind of got a little bit larger. I would still like to keep this, a fairly short term project. I'm hoping no longer than a year to get this out there. So I'm planning on just kind of working on it, as much as I can. I'm still going to try and get it out, early next year. That was kind of the original hope. But obviously, if it takes longer, if I'm thinking it needs a little more time in the oven, then I'll keep working on it. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of the plan for this. Hopefully within a year have this done, and after that, I'm hoping to just make. I mean, just keep on making more games, basically.
Yeah, you just came off a 3 year project, so are you sort of reticent to have another long project?
Yeah, I don't want to do that again. No more. I mean, preferably no more 3-year projects. That was a game that took way longer than I was expecting. Long projects are not for me. It's stressful. It kills motivation. I'm not into it.
Yeah, it's funny how that I was the same. I started off in web development and I ended up working in video for lots of reasons, but one of them was that you get to finish a project in like 2 weeks. It's like, oh my god, this websites took 6 months. I don't know how game developers do it. It's like it's a long time to be passionate about something. So I guess my last question before I let you back is and thanks again for making the time, especially on a Friday afternoon. What are you most excited about when it comes to this project? There's obviously a certain amount of burden that lies on your shoulders, but within the creative mix of making this game, creating the world or developing Charles or the missions or the working with Unreal and the graphics and stuff, what's the thing that you're kind of like, at least right now, the thing that you're the most excited about?
I don't think that there's anything like on the development side, creative side. I don't think that there's anything super specific that I'm like really excited to work on. Like, oh, I can't wait to make these animations or anything like that. Just because I feel like I enjoy everything pretty well, But I think one of the main things that I'm really excited about is just kind of proving to myself that I can hopefully, make a successful game. It's been a long time that I've been working on all this stuff, and just been trying to figure out what is going to work and like how can I predictably make a successful game. And so, it's working so far. It's some of the stuff that I've been thinking about over the past year or so, and hopefully it'll continue to work through completion. So yeah, just kind of proving to myself that this is something that I can actually do, and something that it's not impossible. On top of just being able to finish like for me at least, there's a big drive for like each game to be more successful last and like significantly more so. So just hoping to keep with that, as time goes on, you know, would be great. Like when I was coming to the close of, My Beautiful Paper Smile, when I was getting close to finishing that, I was really, really frustrated for months trying to figure out like I did everything I possibly could. Like, how can you top this, even if it, didn't do that great? Being able to keep with that and keep doing bigger stuff.
Gavin seems really, really just smart and understanding of what he's doing for someone that's so young and yet has been doing it for so long. Like you said before we got into the interview, he has been doing this for a couple of years since he's been in high school. So he started making games when he was 12. That's a pretty wild amount of time to be doing that kind of thing, even as a hobby. And to finally have this success, this huge success overnight almost, that definitely seems like it was a hard switch for him, but one that he's handling pretty well.
Well, I guess time will tell, right? Because to me, I got, he was very open to doing the interview. I think he did one or two more press interviews somewhere else in the meantime, but he has like so much work to do. And I think the beauty of youth is that you often have, eyes that are bigger than your stomach, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And I certainly did when I was that age. And I still kind of do a lot of the time. It's something that as creative people, we have to be really mindful of. So I don't know, maybe it's me being, 35 and looking at this guy who's in his early 20s and thinking like, wishing him the best, like hoping that he's able to take his time at it. I would have some concerns that like he doesn't know the most difficult part of this project yet. He hasn't made a game at this scope. He hasn't made a game with this type of 3D world in it, at least at this scale. So the problems that could arise are probably things that he doesn't know about yet. So hopefully, he seems to definitely have his head on his shoulders. He has a line of progression that I think stabilizes this a lot, where at least he has like 10 years basically of game design experience behind him. So it's not like he's just trying to make his first game and it's this big 3D spider train thing.
Yeah.
But I do worry that that he manages that expectation, that he doesn't overpromise, and that he, in subsequent sort of press stuff maybe evokes the scope of this game tighter again. Because the problem always, we've seen it with big games and small games. No Man's Sky is a great example, where you can sort of be vague and broad about your scope, and then suddenly people think the game is way more broad than you had originally planned.
That's true. You don't want to overpromise and underdeliver because the gaming community doesn't like that sort of thing. But I do hope that, and I think this might be the case, in terms of that inexperience for developing something large in Gavin's case, I hope that he can take the success of the virality that has been Choo Choo Charles and use that to reach out to people, to find people that have been in his situation, totally, that have learned a lot from their own development, and talk to them and build those connections, not just for continuing to work on it on his own, like he seems like he wants to. Maybe he can branch out and collaborate, but if he chooses to stick on that path of working by himself on the project part of it, I hope he'll reach out to some other people in terms of just figuring out how to tempt expectations, but also how to stay focused and find that through line, that the track perhaps that will get him to the station that is a successful launch.
Well, you're totally right. Like if you're working on your own, any one person that helps is basically like doubling the amount of experience. And if you can talk to somebody who's done it before, that's even better. I said to him after the interview, like if you want introductions to people who have done this stuff before, like there's lots of developers that I've talked to over the years who had this moment, right? Who had the first breakout moment. And if they handle it correctly, then they had careers that went on for, another 10 years after that. I also talked to him about publishers. I was like, I'm guessing you had loads of people, right? As we were saying in the interview, talk to you about publishing deals and all this sort of stuff. And I know what that feels like at Noclip, the amount of business that have come to us and asked to like buy us over or try and invest or do so. And it's scary because it means relinquishing control of something that you've made yourself that is, it's worth something clearly in other people's eyes, but to you, it's your life raft. You know what I mean? Like it's your creative life raft that you need to hold on to, and if you give it to someone else, then that's it. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I hope that he reaches out to people, even just a little bit, takes his time and sticks the landing. I think the sort of win-loss ratio on this one, if you don't stick the landing, is probably going to be the trickiest of your career. And if you can get an early win, then I think the rest of his career will be brighter for it. But yeah.
All the best to Gavin. Yeah.
Wish him the best. Absolutely. Yeah. Lovely fella as well. He was very kind to give us the time of day.
Like we said at the top, we were talking about some horror games that we're big fans of that we grew up playing. Ooh. And now we reached out to the community. So we've got a couple tweets here. They hit us up at Noclip Video. First one's from Amber Hamilton. I don't scare easily, but the ones I remember being pretty tense were both Outlast games, Alien Isolation, PT, and Condemned Criminal Origins. Yeah, that last one, Condemned, that one was pretty rough.
that was another kind of one off the back of Fear, right? It was kind of like a first person game where it was a horror thing as well, but like Condemned was way more like melee. Like I remember like picking up mannequin arms and beating people to death with them and like getting in fist fights and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's basically what it was. It was like very visceral in how it presented that, people like trying to attack you, and there was some like detective elements to it as well, of like using your phone and looking into stuff. But then when you weren't, it was almost like Batman, doing a little bit of detective work, and then when you weren't doing that, you were beating the shit out of criminals. It was
bludgeoning people. I mentioned the mannequin. There was one level that was just like in a like mannequin warehouse or something, and it was so scary. I remember like because there was another flashlight in that one as well. If you just want a scary game, just put a flashlight in it. That's what we've learned.
Yeah, automatically. Next one comes from Z2R or Z2R if you're in America. Silent Hill is the one that they've listed here. When the school turned into the other side, I just noped the fuck out. See, I've never played Silent Hill. I don't know what that is.
Dude, next time you hear like an air horn, like a storm warning horn or whatever,
right?
That game, yeah. So Silent Hill was, the sort of, I was joking about it on the Giant Bombcast this week about how if you did an HD remake, I guess they did do an HD remake of Silent Hill, you'd get rid of all the fog, because the game was terrifying because of that whole early PlayStation draw distance problem, right? Where games just had fog on the periphery all the time. But Silent Hill was a game that leaned into it and went, okay, we're going to make this game where it's in this town, where it's abandoned. Where is everyone? And there's just like fog everywhere, so you can't see very far. But then what would happen, and this, spoilers for this 1997 PlayStation game, but what happened is every once in a while, the town would basically like turn into this other version of itself where, there was just that the walls were covered in like guts. Pyramid Head was walking around, who was the scary like character with the massive
I know that
sword.
guy. Yeah, and the big pyramid head. Yeah.
And like the creepy, like just like the body horror of the enemies. It was just awful. But when the horn would go off, because then like it would happen in the sequels and stuff where you'd just be walking around and suddenly you'd hear like and you're like, oh no, it's coming. and that it's just like, yeah, the reaction to it, it's like jump scares are good, but when you know it's coming, it's even worse because you're just like waiting for the fear to hit you. So yeah, great suggestion. Silent Hill, terrific.
Definitely one I got to check out. The last one here is from Shell Comics. They just said Dead Space 1.
Shell Comics, long-term patron as well of Noclip.
Hey, thank you so much for the support.
Yeah, all the way from India. And actually, shout out to all our Indian patrons, because I know there's been a new law in India that has made like digital payments really difficult to do. I don't know what exactly it is, but Patreon are having real trouble with it. So shout out we have a bunch of patrons over in India, I think 5 or 6. So apologies to them. But yes, even scarier than international payments. Dead Space 1. What a game. What a terrific game.
What a classic. The series in general has been fantastic. If it wasn't so good, they wouldn't have fired the team that made it and then brought on a new team to remake the first one. That just shows you how popular it is, right? Maybe that's the scariest part of the game.
Is the game. If you want to, striking distance studios here in the Bay Area is Glenn Schofield's new studio, who is the sort of creative lead on Dead Space, and a bunch of the old Dead Space people are working on that game, which, like, the cynic in me thinks, oh, is that why the Dead Space remake was announced? Because they knew that someone else was making the new Dead Space game under a different name somewhere else. Yeah, I think it goes without saying how much people enjoyed the horror of those games, that when they did skew towards being more action games with Dead Space 2 and definitely with 3, I think that was the signal that, like, oh, people really enjoy, the slow pace thing. And the idea that you can't make it mass market is ridiculous, because Resident Evil is the most mass, and Resident Evil 2, I guess, was more actiony, and Tomb Raider 2 was more actiony. So there's a history, I guess, of when a game is popular, people in a boardroom somewhere saying we need more guns. But a shame what happened to the Dead Space franchise. But yes, a good time, it seems like, for fans of that type of game.
Yeah, the classic first game is still probably one of the best horror games I've ever played, in terms of just the action elements, but also the set pieces and the cutscenes that take place both in the first and the second game. Despite it being a little bit more actiony, I do think the second one is a better overall game.
Yeah, me
but
too.
The first one, the experience of playing that for the first time, and when you get that gun and you start chopping limbs off of these horrible creatures, these Cronenberg monsters, that's a real good time.
And it's scary, and it's a smart way of making gunplay interesting, which is always a challenge, because especially if you've been playing gun games as long as most people our ages are, like, anything interesting and novel totally works. And there was something it made shooting things smart. It wasn't just aim for the head like every other game.
Yeah, if anything, aiming for the head was the wrong move in Dead Space 1.
Exactly, yeah.
From our email, Wesley Lippard says, the most viscerally scary game I've ever played was Outlast, with Outlast 2 in second place. The most existentially scary game was Anatomy, and then Nascence. The most disturbingly scary was The Static Speaks My Name, then Doki Doki Literature Club. And the game that scared me the most relative to me when I played it was BioShock. Hey, same. Because I played that in BioShock 2 when I was probably too little. Yeah, no, same.
There it is again.
Same deal, yeah.
Exactly.
Children playing BioShock is the reason that we're all so anxious and depressed in 2021. That's the reason. It has to be.
It's the same with horror movies. I was thinking, like, what was the scariest movie I grew up? Like, Rigu, first of all, was, like, absolutely terrifying when I was, because I was like I don't know, 10 or 11 when I watched that, and then also Blair Witch Project, because I was super young as well. And you watch it now, and I still think it's scary if you, like, let yourself be scared by it. But it's back then, before the internet, where everyone, like, thought that this may be real. That was way more scary.
Yeah, that was the same thing for my generation too, of watching Paranormal Activity, where we were like,
oh
what?
My God.
Like, that was the same kind of found footage horror movie thing that we all should not have been watching at 12 years old, when we were way too accepting of the reality of things like that. Yeah. Anyways, to get back to the games listed here, Outlast, have you played that one at all?
Yeah, I've played it a bunch. Those games are great, and we've actually spoken to that crowd about doing something. The weird thing is, we've never done any horror game. Well, I guess Alien Isolation, but we haven't done any, what I would consider, I've been saying a lot, sort of capital H horror games.
Yeah.
On Noclip, and we have talked to those guys before about that, but it just hasn't lined up right. I would love to dive into the design of those games, especially, because those games were, to me, I think there's a weird lineage, as you said earlier, between, like, Call of Cthulhu and the Amnesia franchise. And then Outlast kind of, to me, is part of that too. But Outlast really blew up. Like, that was the one that, like, I don't know, maybe Twitch was in the right time. Like, horror games now with stuff like Five Nights at Freddy's, and then Doki Doki doing the sort of, like, rug pull that it does, that Wesley mentioned. These games are now being developed sort of with Twitch in mind, with YouTube in mind, in a way that they obviously weren't when I was growing up.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. You look at a lot of the Let's Plays, a lot of the careers that have started off the back of games like that, and that is kind of, for both parties, right, of the developers and of the content creators, you've seen that be the push forward for games, where that's what horror is now, right, is kind of, it's still scary, but it's a different generation and style of horror. That Outlast seems like it was just before, right? Like, it definitely hit that Twitch marketplace kind of thing. But
I think it was YouTube with Outlast. I think Outlast was part of that YouTube thing, which also makes sense, because the the worst part about playing scary games for a lot of people is being scared.
Yeah.
But they like so much about it. So if you can watch somebody else do it and get scared, maybe a little bit less, and watch them get scared, you're sort of in on the fear. So I think that's a big part of the the entertainment transaction that's going on there.
Apart from the horror stuff, yeah, it's just a fun game to play. But then, like, sometimes you have to run down a hallway from a naked guy, so you kind of got to weigh.
As in life, yeah.
And from our patron Discord, we've got a question from Portal Noob. What are the Noclip team's favorite games of 2021 so far? What are you each most looking forward to?
Man, not much of the year left to be looking forward to, I guess. But yeah,
right.
I guess it is getting towards Game of the Year time. We'll probably do a Game of the Year podcast this year. We've never really done one before, but I've always wanted to. Some of my favorites, weirdly enough, Hitman 3, which came out this year. I cannot believe it was in January. That came out
this year? Yeah, okay.
I
January.
know, isn't that wild? It's been a long year.
Sure has.
Hitman 3 I definitely want to mention because I feel like it's going to get lost in the wash a little bit this year, and just like the story of that studio, like we went over there and we recorded our series on Hitman and on IO Interactive and on how they almost went out of business and barely survived the breakup with Square Enix, and to see them do so well with Hitman and I guess come good out of that with the trilogy is absolutely fantastic. I'm so happy for them. So I think I'm also like personally just invested in the story of Hitman. I think there's a couple of others, like games that we've covered always end up being in there, like Chivalry. I've enjoyed a bunch this year. Chivalry 2, Death's Door is great. Resident Evil Village, speaking of horror games,
yeah.
I guess. There's one really scary level. Well, it didn't freak me out so much, but I know it freaked a lot of people out. There's one really super freaky level in that game, which is pretty good for horror. Deathloop, I'm enjoying Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think it's in the mix for Game of the Year for me, but I'm really enjoying that. But I think the game for me is Valheim. I really enjoyed it. I played it on a server with my friends. I haven't played it in like maybe 2 months, but I still rent the servers. So the village, the towns we built and all the bosses we've defeated are still there. So I want to check it back in on it because they've just put out an expansion pack. But yeah, Valheim maybe is still in the lead for me. I have to jump back in and see what they've added over the past update. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's been a weird year, right? In terms of like, it's been so long of a year, it feels like. There've been so many big releases, but also like because of the collapse of the timeline of life where there are no moments to separate periods of time anymore. It's just there was a pandemic and now we're here, still in it, unfortunately. But it's been an interesting year for games. I think there's stuff that I really loved, like It Takes Two. That was amazing. Played that with my girlfriend from start to finish. Just a really beautiful kind of game narratively, but also just like mechanically very diverse. There's so many moments where you're doing different things. Like I love the nail gun in that. I love the way that the character uses the hammer, and like there's a bit where you're using flamethrowers and there's like squirrels in a tree hanging out with you and doing fun stuff. Just a great game from Hazelight. Fantastic work there. That's probably in my top 3 for sure. I think it's unfair to include Disco Elysium again, but yeah, I mean
that's a last year. When is the director's cut or definitive one? Did that come out? That came out during the summer, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was I think March. Yeah, for the consoles. Yeah, that was a big launch for them. I'm excited that came out. I haven't even gotten a chance to try that one yet because I know it has a bunch of added voice lines and stuff. I'd love to hear some of those lines read out.
All the voice work.
Yeah, it's got to be between It Takes Two. I just finished Metroid Dread. I thought that was fantastic. A really great return to form for that series, even if it is different in a lot of ways. It's great to come back to a 2D Metroid. It's my first one that I've beaten. I have played some of the earlier ones, but it's just a great game to come to. It's nice to play a Metroidvania that is literally a Metroid game. Yeah, this year's been weird. I think Deathloop is up there as well for me.
Yeah.
Top 3 for sure. Those would be my 3 picks, I think, for the year. Deathloop was just really great. I love anything from Arcane.
Man, you're just making the picks. I love it. You're just like, fuck it. I'm not gonna wait. These are my 3.
In my defense, I haven't played a whole lot of games this year, so I don't really have a lot of things to pick from, unfortunately. But yeah, no, you're right. There's not a lot of year to go, so you got to kind of make your picks and go with them. Deathloop was just fantastic. Just a really great experience. Super unique. Something that you don't see a lot of. A lot of time loop games this year, surprisingly, like the Forgotten City, 12 Minutes, Deathloop. It's another one I'm forgetting.
God, I forgot about the Forgotten City. Yeah, another doc coming from us in the not too distant. Yeah, and there's not all that much left. We've got Halo Infinite coming out. a couple of other bangers, but it's almost end of the year. We will get to that. We will ask all of you your favorite games, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. Make sure to hit us up, podcast@noclip.video, with any of your questions. And of course, you can ask questions about just about anything. It doesn't need to be the focus of the interview or the focus of the podcast that week. Thank you so much to everyone who's been sending messages about the podcast returning. Thank you to everyone who's been dropping reviews, rating us on iTunes and all that sort of stuff, and sharing it with their friends and parents and loved ones and grandparents and everyone.
Pets.
Thanksgiving's coming up.
Just leave it on.
Exactly. Put it on the background while you're carving that turkey. Sorry, Jesse. Canadian Thanksgiving already happened.
Yeah, stop bragging, all right? Jeez.
All right, that'll do it for another week. Podcast@noclip.video if you want to send us your emails. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in messages on the Discord channel. We have a podcast questions channel there via email, or hitting us up at NoclipVideo on the Twitter. Like I said, we have docs on Chivalry 2 and Death's Door up on the Patreon. There's a bunch of Patreon exclusive stuff this month. We have our production meeting this Friday where I'm going to talk about some of the docs that are coming to our producer tier, and a couple of other stuff that we haven't announced yet. I know there's, we've said we've got Black Mesa coming and The Forgotten City. There's a couple more we haven't announced, so we're going to be talking about them during that meeting, and then we'll be telling the rest of the patrons probably in the patron update in November. If you'd like to support the podcast, fund our documentaries, and get access to all of our bonus episodes and the official Discord, you can do so at patreon.com/noclip. And we are at NoclipVideo on Twitter. I'm at Daniel Dwyer. He is at
Garasha, Guara, S like Sam, CIA.
It's beautiful. I love it. I hear it in my dreams now. Watch our free documentaries at youtube.com/noclipvideo. Listen to the podcast at youtube.com/noclippodcast, or wherever podcasts are sold. Well, it's free. We don't do ads here.
Yeah.
And every review helps us, so make sure to spread the word and help us out. That is our transaction with you. We will do this with no ads. We will never talk about fucking penis pills or mattresses.
Do you want to get a pillow? Like, what are you doing? Come on.
No. Live your life, man. There's enough ads out in the world without us adding to it. But in return, consider becoming a patron, or just give us a review. We'd really appreciate it. Jesse, thank you so much. I'll talk to you next week, and thank you to everyone for listening. I'll talk to you too. See you then.